Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a review of the brand new film, The Flash. Film many years in the making, costing many hundreds of millions of dollars, both in production budget and in marketing, and the film is finally here, and let's just say, I got a lot of thoughts on this movie, but before we get further into my review, please make sure to smash the like button, leave the fire button, honestly, and smash the rumble button as well, and also make sure that you are subscribed to make sure you have that bell notification on that way you know every live stream goes live on the channel. So let's go ahead and dive into the review. So The Flash, starring the amazing, the wonderful, the beautiful, the one that every person loves, Ezra Miller. Said no one ever. Ezra Miller's in this movie, and he's in this movie twice over because he has his own past self, as we are knowing, of course, from the trailer, included with his regular, present-day self as well. And it's just as annoying as it sounds. And if you've seen the trailer, it's just about as annoying as what you see there. Really, as far as the overall quality of the film, I'll start off with the positives because there are a lot more negatives than there are positives. But the one thing I will say is, hey, I know everyone's been saying it, and I know it's kind of an old trope at this point when it comes to the experience that people are having with this movie, but Michael Keaton absolutely steals the show. I mean, I really honestly wish they had decided to make an actual old man Batman movie instead, having the Flash in the background, because Ezra Miller really isn't that much of a leading man. He really can't carry a movie all by himself, and having someone like Michael Keaton, who's a seasoned actor, who has been able to live with this role, not only having gone through 2 movies himself, but then also being able to have many years, to be able to think back on the role and reflect on it. And of course, being always known as, a very iconic version of Bruce Wayne and of Batman. He's able to build on that, whereas someone like Ezra Miller, right, very young in this role and has not been ever really given a whole lot of screen time, let alone an entire movie to carry, and it shows. So I think that Michael Keaton having his own movie would have been so much better, and I really wish that he was in the film a lot more. I know that also, shout out to Az, because I was watching his review before going into the movie, and I actually decided to keep my eye on this actress, but Sasha Calais, I think that's how her name is pronounced, but she is the one that plays who plays Kara, who plays, was it Supergirl in the movie, and I thought that she was very good. I remember seeing the trailers and honestly being very cringed by what we actually saw, and I'm glad that they did not show us a whole lot of that character, because it absolutely is so much better in the movie, because I think that she shows herself to be a very powerful actress. She shows herself to be very competent in her acting abilities, and once again, very similar to Michael Keaton, she steals the show in every single scene that she is in, and it makes anyone in the audience who's going to be honest ask the question, why is this movie about Ezra Miller? Why is Ezra Miller being given this lead performance when the other characters surrounding him are so much more interesting, let alone the actors are so much more talented and competent in their performance? And I think that a lot of that also goes to another positive, which would be, I think, the direction of the movie in most of the scenes that are taking place. And I mean, when I say direction, I mean how the actors themselves are actually being directed to perform. And I think that a lot of that comes from the direction that's given. Andres Muschietti, he actually has some experience, mostly in horror films, so very odd choice, but this is kind of the standard fare nowadays, it seems, for many of the studios, right? Disney and Warner Brothers are kind of notorious at this point for trying to hire people who probably aren't nearly as, as expensive, probably aren't nearly as experienced as they should be, especially by the fact that they, hired Christina Hodson to actually write the script for this. And up until this point, the biggest movie that she's ever written to this day would be, the 2 biggest movies would be Bumblebee and would be Birds of Prey. And both of them are not very well-written movies, especially Birds of Prey. And for some reason, she was put in charge of writing The Flash. But I think that the direction of the film actually is not all that terrible. And so there is definitely a competent hand behind the scenes, because there are indeed a lot of sequences that connect with one another. And it's a competently made movie, right? As far as from point A to point B, as far as the direction is concerned. That's really where the positives end, because everything else is kind of really bad and actually pretty trash. And so first and foremost, everyone's talking about it, but it is true. You all know I'm a very I'm a very stingy person when it comes to CGI, let alone bad CGI. But when I say that this is probably the worst CGI that I've ever seen in a major big budget movie, this is the worst CGI I have ever seen in a major big budget movie. For any film that's ever cost $200+ million, I do not think I have ever seen CGI this bad before. I know there's been a lot of images that have been leaked those pale in comparison to actually seeing it in real life. From the very beginning of the movie, when you're seeing the Flash doing his thing, whether it is him running very fast, whether it is him, at a hospital in the very beginning of the movie doing different things, the CGI is so terrible. And not just the CGI, but also the very clear green screen effects. There's a couple of scenes where you see Ezra Miller in the foreground and you could tell, oh yeah, that's a green screen or a blue screen behind him. And oh boy, those effects do not look very well polished, does not look natural, and it is very distracting. The entirety of the movie has so many moments where you're thinking to yourself, what in the hell did they spend all this money on? Because it was not their visual effects department, and if it was, oh boy, what in the world were they thinking when they put this together, let alone when they decided to release it? It is embarrassingly bad. It is embarrassingly poor as far as the effects are concerned, even to the point where they're showing actors who are in the movie, so not even old scenes or old sequences from previous films, but scenes that are actually shot in the movie, where instead of bringing it back or instead of doing some old school editing techniques or editing effects, they instead bring it back as a completely CGI, computer-generated imagery, and it's awful. It is so bad. So again, I don't know who was in charge of visual effects, but or whether, maybe they were overworked. I know that that's been a lot of the discussion when it comes to Disney and their films, how there's been a lot of heavy turnaround on it. But seeing how much time and how many years this movie had, I just honestly don't think that there's much of an excuse. The CGI is complete garbage in this movie. And this is not, just me being a stingy person about it. This is something that the vast majority of people watching the film, I remember even seeing in the theater, right? Not a whole lot of people were at my screening, but a lot of people who were in there were kind of looking at each other whenever the CGI would get really bad, which happened quite a bit. And you can kind of tell they were like, what the heck is this, right? Overall, though, a lot of the people that were in the theater seemed to enjoy the movie, right? And so the CGI, though being terrible, was not nearly bad enough for a lot of people who were going to actually see it, because the story, even though it is trash, because as I said, the writer of the film is not very good, because I think of the competence of the direction, where the thing seems to flow together, the images, the pacing seems to flow together, even though obviously it does run quite a bit long. I think that this is kind of the standard of most of these modern Hollywood big budget movies, is that they go on for far too long. But I think that direction is probably what keeps and will keep many audiences not, tuning this out altogether. But one of the bad parts of this movie is the writing, right? So even though the direction, I do think, is competent, the writing is not. If you think about and just take a second to think about this movie, you realize, oh my goodness, this thing is so haphazardly put together. It seems and it comes across as if there are several different chefs in the kitchen, which makes sense, because you do not want someone like Christina Hodson having full control and full reign. We see what happens when that does happen, right? We've seen the terrible films that she has done when she is mostly by herself. So it makes sense that over the course of the many years that this film took, they probably had more people coming in to do rewrites, to make things in certain places a little bit better. But it also makes this almost Frankenstein's monster's worth of a film story that just does not work in many ways. You start off at one point where you have a pretty good explanation of the multiverse, which again, so many of these films now doing multiverses, it's getting very old, and it's not like there's been a ton of movies that have focused on it specifically, but enough to where it's gotten old for, I think, a lot of people. But they have a very interesting way of describing it, and then later in the movie, at the very end of the movie, they decide to do something where certain characters disappear. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to trying to speak as vaguely as I can to try not spoil much of anything. But people disappear, and it completely is counterintuitive to what's going on, right? You have people disappearing, and yet one person remains, and you're like, wait a minute, timeline-wise, that does not make any sense whatsoever. It was a very frustrating moment for me, because I'm thinking like, okay, for the most part, you've actually handled time travel and handled the multiverse stuff pretty well. Again, it still has that silliness of a comic book movie, but hey, that's kind of what you expect with these movies. But then they made the decision like that, and it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. But all that being said, this movie has certain things going for it. I think especially the performances given by Michael Keaton, and also the performance given by Sasha Calle. I think that they are both fantastic in the film. I think that they're great. Really wish that it was their movie. Again, Batman and Supergirl, I actually would want to see that movie. I would actually think that would be a much better movie. But the fact that Ezra Miller is in the film, and this is just taking away any of the allegations that have been brought against him, obviously that's going to impact and color the image that many people have going into this movie. So much so that some people are just refusing to see it because that he is in it and because he is the lead, and they don't want to give any money to a film that's going to support someone like him and all the various things that have been alleged against him. But with that being said, it does not take away from the performances of those around him. And even though I don't think he's a garbage tier actor as far as his objective acting ability, I just think that his performance does not really match not only what many people in their minds would probably have in their head when it comes to what Barry Allen and what the Flash should be like, but also it becomes very one note. There's not a lot of range there. It becomes very monotonous. It becomes very just over and over again, the same points, the same inflections. And especially when there's two of them on screen, it just becomes that much more obvious that he is either just ignoring direction or he's being given bad direction. And whether that's coming from Andres Muschietti, I don't know. I don't know if he decided to be on the day that he was giving direction to Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle. Maybe it's that they themselves are just very talented actors who are able to handle things on their own with very little direction. I don't know what it might be, but just, again, based on perception itself, the acting is, again, kind of all over the place. Overall, though, the film, I think some people will enjoy it. Again, there are certain elements, especially the Michael Keaton moments, Supergirl moments, that I think some people will be able to attach themselves to. But I also think there's a lot of moments, especially the CGI, which is just so plenteous in this movie, and it really doesn't need to be. Of course, people have been mentioning different spoilers related to the film as far as certain, cameos, and I won't go into detail there. But again, especially when CGI is involved with those cameos, it's abysmal. It's awful. It's some of the worst effects that I've ever seen. If people thought that the removal of the mustache from the film that featured Henry Cavill, where they digitally removed his mustache and his mouth looked all messed up, okay, think about that times 1,000. And that might even be generous to talk about how bad the visual effects in this movie actually are. It's again, pretty pathetic. And I don't say that very often. I usually am critical of effects, but I usually don't go after the teams. In this case, I will say whoever is working on this film's visual effects, either they were being rushed and whoever made those decisions to rush them should be fired, or the people who did the effects should be fired, because it's gosh awful. It's really, really bad. So if I had to give this film a grade, I think I'm going to go ahead and give this film a C-. Again, it's not the worst film I've ever seen. It's not the worst DCEU film I've ever seen. I prefer this in many respects to anything that Zack Snyder ever did, and that's probably going to trigger some people because there's a lot of Zack Snyder, lovers out there, obsessed, cult-like members out there for Zack Snyder. And again, if you like those films, that's on you. But I think this film is infinitely better than a lot of those movies and a lot of the ways that they're presented. But still doesn't make it a good movie. And, just because it's in comparison to something that is just really, really bad does not automatically make this film any better. But I really honestly am coming away from this saying, man, if this is the last time that we're going to see Michael Keaton as Batman and this is how it goes out, I wish he was in a better movie. I wish that he had his own movie. And I wish that they brought in, again, if there is an alternate universe somewhere where they make Batman and Supergirl, and let that be a story, it would be a heck of a lot more interesting than what we got here with Ezra Miller's Barry Allen, which is just silly. Although, also, for those that want to know, there is one post-credit scene. There's not a mid-credit scene, but there's a post-credit scene. And it's funny because there was an Esquire article that was trying to, kind of build it up and kind of make it seem like it was something bigger than it wasn't. It's a throwaway scene that does nothing for anything as far as the future is concerned. And I would say you don't have to wait for it. I would say look it up and find out what it does and what it is online, because you're going to just waste your time. In fact, I'll go ahead and mention it in 3, 2, 1. So in the post-credit scene, what you have is Barry Allen and Aquaman talking to each other. Barry Allen's trying to explain to him some of the things that happened, and then Aquaman's drunk and falls into a puddle. I wish I was making it up, but that's the post-credit scene. And again, I know that they're trying to reset it with, James Gunn, and he's trying to reset everything. But this film really does not do anything to set up the future. It really does not do anything to indicate what's going to happen. Now, of course, could they reference back to this film and say, oh, it's because of the timeline being messed up and it's because of all these other multiverse things happening that it's going to lead to this reset? Sure. But nothing in the film, as far as how it ends, really sets up any of the stakes of what's going to happen in the future, which makes the film pretty worthless and overall a throwaway movie that is not really going to be important, or at the very least, the way it's being presented at this point doesn't seem like it's going to be having any importance whatsoever. But those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Have you seen the film? Did you like the film or not? Do you have some of the same concerns and issues that I have? Let me know in the comment section down below. I've already done a box office breakdown and preview for this movie. And if the movie's numbers hold at what is expected, which is 70 million domestic, 155 international, those are what's being reported right now as far as the projections. Yeah, that's going to be really bad. That's going to indicate this film is set to flop, especially since this film probably costs well more than $200 million and you don't even see it on screen. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that 5 button, I see you smash the rumble button. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my June Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals members at the Keeper, the Bifrost level and above. Starting off first with Patreon, Father Luca Illich, Heimir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check it over at his YouTube channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. And again, thank you all very much for being my supporters. If you want your name shout out at the end of every live stream and every video, check out the top link in the video description below. You also can get access to things like a giveaways channel where I give away Blu-rays, 4K steelbooks, all kinds of stuff every single, most weeks in the month. I try to give away something, or at the very least towards the end of the month, I will make it up with several giveaways. Basically, most people are guaranteed to walk away with something at the end of every single month. So if you want access to that, again, check out the top link in the video description below, as well as access to an exclusive podcast. This past month, I was actually able to record a great podcast with Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. So you want access to that and also a plethora of other content, check out the link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.